Right. Welcome everybody to Keep It Real Fridays. We are back after a brief break. So before we get started, because I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have this evening, and I got some good friends of mine that have come to join me on this discussion this evening. But just want to give you a little spiel about Keep It Real Fridays if this is your first time watching. So Keep It Real Fridays is a vision that God gave me a little bit about 15 years ago now. And God started this vision as a youth and young adult service, where we used to do youth and young adult services at various churches around the DC area, where we would do service in a different way for youth and young adults. It would allow the opportunity for youth and young adults to share their gifts, share their talents, whether it was mime, spoken word poetry, whether it was dance, whether it was drama, just various forms of art expressions, but also providing a safe space for youth and young adults to come into the church and be able to worship in a different way. Because for many of us growing up, there weren't really many opportunities to be able to worship in very different spaces or in very different ways. There were opportunities to be on the usher board or be in a youth choir, but we wanted to try to provide a space that would really connect with young people. So we've been doing that for the duration of this time, and we've just been doing ministry in just different forms and different fashions. But as we know, we're in the midst of the pandemic, so we're doing ministry through Keep It Real Fridays in a different way. And so the way we're doing it is we're offering this online platform through social media, where we are having conversations about youth and young adult related issues and youth and young adult ministry related issues, or topics, not necessarily issues. And this is the way that we're kind of doing ministry in a different way through this virtual time. So this evening, I'm excited because I feel like this is a reunion of some sort. Some of you may not know these folks, but these are all great friends of mine that I have the opportunity to just be able to serve in ministry through the years. I have had the opportunity to connect with these folks since the year 2009. Wow, it's been 11 years, y'all. 11 years I've been connected to these folks. So these persons that I brought on Keep It Real this evening are persons that used to be what I call anchors in youth and young adult ministry years ago. And they have all moved in different areas of ministry, still touching youth and young adults in some capacity in some way. But these are folks that I was able to connect with in 2009 at a time where youth ministry was just booming. Not to say that it's not now, but, you know, these individuals were just like, you know, they were anchors of youth ministry around the DC area. And so, but what we're talking about today is that even after you've been doing youth and young adult ministry for a long time, or for a while, for a season, there's a season where it ends. And so tonight's topic is, you know, after youth and young adult ministry, what's next? And this topic had kind of came to me because I was having a conversation with some friends that's in youth ministry, in young adult ministry. And there's a group of us that are like in that 35 to 45 range that are trying to figure out what's next. And all of us are feeling like we're at the next leg of this journey. And, you know, we're just kind of like ready to figure out, how do we pass on the baton? And are we really going to be doing this for the rest of our lives? But before we get into that, I'm just going to allow the opportunity for this great panel of just great people in ministry to introduce themselves. And I'm going to first ask Monique if she would introduce herself. And then after Monique, I'm going to ask Pastor Peyton Gray. And then, you know, Pastor Bobby and Pastor Tony to introduce themselves.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Monique Johnson. I'm the executive director of a Fresh Start CLT here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We serve survivors of human trafficking and their children. I've had, I feel like, over 20 years of ministry time that I've served in youth ministry, children's ministry, kind of college ministry, and it kind of fluctuates in between. And I used to go to Hope Christian Church for about 25, 26 years in the Washington, D.C. area in Beltsville, Maryland. And then I moved here to Charlotte, and I currently go to Nikeo Church here in Charlotte, where Pastor Brian and Tamika Dooley are the pastors, and I'm involved with the children's ministry there. So.
Wow. Thank you, Thomas, first of all, for having me on the panel with all of these great people. All of them are friends. I'm a Pastor Peyton Gray, presently the senior pastor, lead pastor of For Him Covenant Church in Beltsville, Maryland. Formerly, I was the youth and young adult pastor at Evangel Cathedral for about 10 years. And then I was on staff for 14 years and was a member for 28 years. So was there and in ministry. I've been in ministry for about 23, 24 years. And so it's been a privilege to meet everybody in the course of time through the young adult conference we had, through the different activities we had when we were youth pastors and youth ministers. And so that's my story.
Hey everyone, thanks Thomas for inviting all of us. My name is Bobby Mathieu. For years I was the youth pastor at Anacostia Gospel Chapel, and that's in Southeast Washington, D.C. My wife and I directed Camp Dynamite, which was a Christian overnight summer camp. Currently I'm at Landmark Church of Alexandria, where Pastor Elwood Jones is the pastor, and I'm working with the kids ministry there and trying to figure out how to do kids ministry during this time of COVID-19. So if anyone has suggestions, I'm all ears.
All right, thanks again, Thomas. I'm gonna just piggyback off everybody else. Thank you for welcoming us to your panel this evening. I am Pastor Tony Bledsoe, lead pastor, senior pastor at Powerhouse Church of God. I was the youth and young adult pastor at National Church of God for 16, 17 years. And you know, it's really, really great to work with young people and still, you know, working with them as well now here at Powerhouse. So thank you, Thomas, once again. And it's great to be here with all these great young youth and young adult pastors, man. I'm just in the spirit of awe right now.
I'm gonna warn y'all now. We're probably going to cut up on this call for the next 51 minutes because we're family and we love each other and we love to clown each other. But and you'll hear some kind of sarcasm y'all not gonna understand. So just warning y'all in advance. But you know, thank you all for your introductions, and definitely this is family. And I want to kind of touch on something from you all's introductions. All of you have talked about just tenure in different places doing youth and young adult ministry, like 10 years, 14 years, 20 years, you know, just really at a time where it's a term out there in the youth ministry world that, you know, that youth ministry ministers and pastors and leaders were kind of known to be youth ministry lifers. You know, where people were in youth ministry for like 10, 15, 20, 25 years. It's not necessarily the case now. There's still some people like myself. I'm still kind of an OG now. I'm kind of like the OG now, kind of like looking in that direction of what's next in my life. But during this time where like youth ministry was really booming for you all, when you all were serving, this question, how would you describe the time in which you were engaged in youth ministry or young adult ministry? And I'm going to actually pass this question to Monique first, and then anybody else can jump in afterwards.
Okay, I apologize. I just knew you were going to pick someone else first. So, so can you say it one more time, the question? I'm so sorry. I just knew he was going to call one of the guys first. So I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, at a time where we're focused really on tenure in ministry. Like, you know, at the time we were in ministry, it was a bunch of youth ministry lifers. And that's not necessarily the case now. There's a few people holding on like OGs like myself now that's been in youth ministry for 15 plus years or so. But I want, at the time where youth ministry was really booming, during the time that we all met, like, how would you describe your experience in youth ministry or young adult ministry at that time?
Oh my goodness, it was incredibly busy. Not only were you doing a lot within your youth ministry, but there was a lot of connecting with other youth ministries, especially when you saw, let's say this youth ministry had a phenomenal go-go band. And so you would bring your youth ministry and y'all would go there. And it was a lot of, I felt like, opportunities where other ministries had an opportunity to connect. It didn't always happen that way, but depending on who the youth leader was, it definitely opened that door and allowed, especially if you had a smaller church or if you had even some of the larger churches, people would be like, okay, we know that on Friday nights, sometimes this is the spot to go to, or, you know, this church is known for this. For me, I felt like I became more engaged with what was happening at other youth ministries. And then it was also unique because of all of us meeting. It gave us an opportunity to kind of know what others were doing, the things that were working, the things that were not working. When you're working with youth from various different backgrounds and in the different style churches that we all came from, we were working with different youth, whether it was like more inner city youth, whether it was suburban youth, you know, we had so many different types. And so it was unique because we could take from the relationships that we built with other leaders and use that in order to impact the youth that we were dealing with, or even sharing experiences. So I found that there were a lot of events that were taking place that offered the opportunity for youth to have fun things to do, greater than what was necessarily happening, quote unquote, in the world, if that makes sense.
I have to agree with Monique. I remember Club JC. I remember the Exodus Band, Gideon, Submission.
Yes.
And you can't forget Peyton when Peyton put on boot camp. There was there were so many people who made decisions, lifelong decisions at boot camp, at one of those workshops or at the concerts. And I remember the Washington Youth Network that Terry Millender and Steve Fitzhugh put together. And I think there was a time of collaboration back then because we were in a small church, but there was always somewhere else where we could go. And the kids that we worked with could see we're not the only ones that are trying to live out this faith. There's a larger community. There's a larger group. They were able to see the body of Christ, basically. They were able to see the body of Christ in action because there were so many different things that were going on that everyone had access to.
Also,
Bobby, I got
one more thing that I thought was cool. I was a young leader that became a leader. So because I was a young leader that became a leader, our youth pastors were big into pouring into and raising up other leaders. Yeah. So I know about being a part of Powerhouse, and I know about the things that were taking place over at Evangel because I went to their events myself as a young adult that was about to be, who was already operating as a leader. And then I was going to, be a leader. So I was a part of I was able to go to their youth ministries on the nights that they had events as well and partake myself. Like I, to this day, will never forget a message that I won't give the whole message that Peyton gave. And I was just like, gosh, this youth pastor is just so cool in how he was so real. And he was just, I was like, he talks our language and I love it. And I remember that. I remember first hearing about Ty Tribbett because of an event that Peyton had when he first came out. So yeah, I'm going to be quiet. Yeah,
I want to jump in real quick, Monique, because I got to shout out Coach Ron Carter, who's watching with us. So shout out to Coach Ron Carter, who is connected to all of us, and love you, Coach, and appreciate you tuning in. Want to kind of pass Peyton or Tony if you want to jump in.
I agree with what Monique and Bobby are saying. Being that I was part of on a larger scale of youth ministry, being at National Church of God, I think we had one of the best gospel go-go bands in the area. Resurrection Band, better known as Psalms 150. And we had, every Friday night, they was cranking, and what I like most back then is that the parents, right, really wanted their kids to love God, so they would bring them out to our events. And I can't really speak on if that's happening today, but I know back then the mentality of the young people back then is totally different than the mentality of the young people today. And the parents, mentality is totally different as well. So we had no problem, and knowing that we hosted an event, like that we was gonna have a good crowd. And also I like the fact back then, you didn't have to worry about that mentality to where people you think I'm gonna steal your youth ministry, your youth ministry kids. We didn't care. We just wanted to do things together in order for us to be able to show these kids, that it's something more and something better, out there for them, and it's in the house of God. So we were able to. I mean, even with Peyton, I love Peyton to death. Boot camp. He that's my hero right there. He the one who really got me involved. With his events at boot camp, and I took that stuff back. Over to national. We started doing our own thing. So I think the collaboration, that each ministry had and didn't have to worry about, you taking, your kids, won't start coming here because they like what you're doing more over there than over here. We didn't think like that. And it's totally different, in some churches today. They don't want you to have their kids, and even invite their kids out to your events.
Yeah, I think I want to take a different approach, Thomas, and talk about longevity and talk about the time, because I think everybody has said a lot of great things. And I thank you so much. You guys really making me blush. I know you can tell. Because you guys in your own right would, have done a lot of great things and still are. But I got to give a big shout out to Pastor Kevin Matthews, because he and I both hosted boot camp and it was a joint collab. But I think one of the things that I think Tony can identify with is we kind of were in the middle of the mega church movement. That's when mega churches were blowing up. And I think the unique thing about our relationships were bigger. A lot of us who came out of bigger churches had to deal with the mentality of don't go over there because they might steal the kids. Don't go over there because they might steal the kids. And we never had that. We never had that mentality among ourselves. It was what Tony was saying, is what Monique was saying. We wanted to create a platform that kids could see an alternative to what they were getting in the world. And we were just fortunate enough to be in places that had a budget and said, hey, listen, because the mega church movement is growing, and we got to do something with these kids. And what do you think is the best way to do it? And we were just raised up to be those guys and ladies in that time that the mega church had blown up. So one of the things I think that was crucial, that I know talking to all of you guys, is that we never saw youth ministry as a platform to get to someplace bigger. We felt like youth ministry that was our calling.
Yeah.
Like, when I first became a minister, about a year and a half later, the Lord said, no, I don't want you to just be a minister. I want you to pastor these kids. I want you to keep these kids. That's why it was like longevity. It was not about me being here for a year, blowing up, trying to create a platform for myself to be the next great speaker, the next Jakes or whoever. It was about, let me pastor these kids and see these kids grow up. And it wasn't like one generation. It might have been 2 generations or 3 generations. That's why we stayed around so long, because then the kids that we, first of all, we had to build a trust with people. And then we had to be consistent so kids could see, oh wow, this person is here for a long time. Because they, in some of them, at least some of the kids that I dealt with, it was like, well, he ain't gonna be trying to do X, Y, and Z and go on to the next thing. And then when they there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, now you begin to have credibility. And then when you're doing things that and putting them in charge and empowering them, now you're raising up the next generation of leaders that can take over the church and run the church. And that was always my vision, that we would have the second and third generations of kids who would take over Evangel and then be the pillars for it. So we were just using the platform that was given to us, the resources that were given to us. And then we didn't think it was robbery to develop and then share it with Monique, share it with Bobby, share and exchange ideas, because that's how we were going to expand the kingdom. We're all kingdom minded. We were all, let's expand the kingdom. This wasn't about just who got the best youth ministry, who's this, but if Tony had steppers, had these concepts, or Bobby had this, then it was like, boom, let's pull them in. Then we're looking to identify the Thomas Brackeen, looking to identify the next generation of guys who are coming up. So that's why you create a platform, so that you can put that guy up, give them comfort and give them the experience to be able to minister to kids. And then we're exchanging, we listening, and we building friendships. So we weren't trying to duplicate what we saw, guys fighting over territory, guys fighting over who got the most amount of people. We were trying to fight to keep that away, to keep the ministry pure, so that kids can have a city of refuge, that they wasn't had to get caught up in all of that. They wasn't getting caught up in all of this stuff. Now, that I think that was one of the demises to youth ministry as it began to disintegrate, because then people started getting in because they wanted the fame without paying the price. Like, we started from ground zero and we built that joint. We had to build that thing up. And so for us, it was like, this isn't something that this cost us something. We put our families, we put our marriages, we put everything into this. And so cats started coming along, they started seeing the crowds, and all of a sudden they just wanted the crowds without making a commitment to being in this thing for a long period of time. So that was kind of the reason why we were, where we were for long periods of time.
You're talking good stuff, Peyton.
That people understand that servant leaders produce servant leaders.
Yeah,
so if you are a servant leader that is showing what it looks like to serve in the midst of understanding, okay, I am trying to produce a generation that understands holiness. I am trying to produce a generation that understands what integrity is. I'm trying to produce a generation that looks at what character is. And it's not something that's far off, but it's something that they possess, because I, as a leader that is serving them, is showing them that. And so if I'm a servant leader, then I should be producing servant leaders, so that in turn, the cycle can continue. However, if I had a servant leader who poured into me, but I don't want that, I just am looking out for myself and I'm being selfish, then the cycle stops and I don't produce anything but what I really am, which is selfish. And you have a lot of leaders, unfortunately, that had servant leaders that poured into them, but they were not necessarily the ones that wanted to pour into someone else. And so that's where you see something that was going for so long, and then all of a sudden there became this stop.
Yeah, this is about to get good. I'm about to ask these folks to drop their cash apps, because they up here preaching. They up here preaching real good already. Y'all said a whole bunch of good stuff, and I want to grab some of it. And I just want to say I'm thankful, because it was a season or a time of collaboration. I remember just having the opportunity to just put my kids on a church band and come to boot camp and come to see Resurrection band play, because we were all about gospel go, and even when Hope was sponsoring and stuff, it was just so much back then, and so many opportunities to connect. And I wish we could still do that. And there's barriers to that. And I know we could probably get into a whole nother discussion of barriers of why we don't get to do that as much anymore. But I want to ask you all the question: who were your greatest influence, and what? And it can be either who your greatest influences were, or what kind of kept you determined to be that servant leader. And I'm gonna actually pass this to Tony.
Oh wow! Be totally honest with you, man. I really didn't have a whole lot of individuals that I would say kind of influenced me in the youth ministry, except for one or two. And like I said, the main one, and I keep tooting his horn because I kind of shadowed Peyton without him even knowing that I was shadowing him at Evangel. And what kept me determined was I have daughters, right? And I took over youth ministry. I was called into youth ministry when my oldest daughter was 15. right? So I watched both of my daughters, and I taught both of my daughters in youth ministry, and you have to have. I had a passion, for young people. Even before I got into youth ministry, Pastor T.L. Lowry actually pulled me out of class and had me to start teaching children's ministry, and it just grew from there. So I've always had that passion. But as far as the influences go, man, I didn't watch a lot of youth pastors, here in the area, and I wasn't really connected to a lot of them per se. But once I began to really watch and shadow Peyton to a certain degree, and Brother Matthews as well, they just opened my eyes up to a whole nother level of where God was leading me, in youth ministry at National. So I like I said, I tip my hat off to Peyton, in that, and he doesn't know it. I don't toot his horn a whole lot. But I love the brother. Even you, Thomas. I don't even know if you remember, man. I invited your band out. You came and did. Your band came. I didn't even know you could sing, dude. And Thomas came over. So you guys kept me, and the young people just kept me hungry, and wanting, because once you become a youth pastor, it's like you become a father figure, and you don't want to let those kids down, and all you want, you begin to treat them just like they're yours, and that's what keeps you keeps you going. That's what motivates you, is because you want to see them succeed, especially those, that doesn't have that, that the foundation, that some others have. But those that that don't have that foundation, man, it just give you that passion and that hunger, to want to see them succeed.
And Tony, thanks for inviting my band out, man. My gospel go-go career lasted about 1.5 years, so you gave me one good. I think that was the one event I actually hit a good note, so I appreciate that. How about you, Bobby, Monique?
I would have to say it was my youth pastor when I was coming up. She took 4 of us. We were about maybe 15, 16 years old. And she basically poured into us. She taught us how to plan. She taught us how to do a youth event, how to do a youth service. She taught us how to teach. And then she put us up in front, and she let us fail a couple of times. And then we evaluated what went wrong. And because of those experiences, that sparked my love of teaching, which became my occupation as well. So her name is Reverend Gail Anderson Massey, and those years.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh, Bobby, I think you froze up.
Bobby.
While we
There you go.
Back.
Okay, you froze up for a second. If you repeat that last part.
Pastor Gail Anderson Massey was the one who was my youth pastor, and her spending those 2 or 3 years pouring into us and teaching us, and then allowing us to succeed and to fail, and helping us learn what to do when we fail, how to evaluate. That's what really ignited my passion for youth ministry.
For me, there were a couple people: Felicia Yangamau, Curtis DePass. My mother was our youth pastor for years, and she allowed me to see what it meant for a female to lead and to grow a youth ministry quickly. Pastor Carlos Reyes. These were youth pastors. One thing I just have to say, Hope Christian Church's youth ministry was incredible. It truly was incredible, and the opportunities that we had. And Pastor Lily Jackson, these were pastors who were there who did not see us based off of our age, but they saw the God gift in us and were determined to pull it out and pour everything that they had into us. And so forever grateful for the youth pastors that Hope Christian Church had, because we learned so much, and they never once thought, like, you're too young, Dr. Vivian. And it's what's interesting is many of the mentors and the ones who poured into me have gone home to be with the Lord. And I often have moments where it's like I become full because there are people now who I pour into who are like, where did that come from? Like, where does that? And I'm like, if they could have only seen the harvest, because they've sowed so many seeds. The harvest is so great, and I know God is going to give them so much credit for it. But there were phenomenal leaders who really saw us they saw us as leaders, and they helped make us into that. So.
Peyton.
Real quick, big shout out to my buddy Rochelle Andrews. She just gave me a shout out, and then we want a big shout out to Bishop Harry Jackson, who just went on to be with the Lord, who is a great man of God, who, man, just had all my respect in the world, and I was just shocked to hear that he went on to be with the Lord. My examples were, number one, the Mears family, John Mears and Don Mears and Elder Virgil Mears, Bishop Don, Bishop John, who really had a heart for young people. There would not be a me or boot camp or anything if they hadn't had a heart for it and wanted to see particularly young people touched and developed, raised up. And then my two youth pastors, Pastor Tim Say and Pastor James and Gwyneth Holcomb, they set the example for me, and they were the ones who poured into me and pushed me in the direction to be serious about the word, to be serious about the lifestyle, to be serious about, caring about people, and showed me how to do it. Then there were a lot of different ministry gifts that I saw around the body of Christ, but really it was what was put in front of me that was so influential in me. And then it was just really, I was glad I had people who pressed me to make sure that I had a real relationship with God, because that's been the staying power to be in ministry, is having your own relationship, and God lead you and guide you through the different phases of what you're going to do, and what's going to happen is having that relationship with the Lord. So those were the influences for me.
And I think it's awesome, Peyton, what you said, because you're absolutely right. Without phenomenal leadership, as far as the church is concerned, a lot of these youth ministers that poured into our lives came because of the head. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so when I do think of Bishop Harry Jackson and Dr. Vivian and them leading Hope Christian Church, it opened the door. And I mean, there are other things in other areas of my life that I know are because of what they poured in to me. But when I look at all of us, and I think no matter where we are in life, if it were not for leaders in the church who had the vision from the Lord and hired whoever they hired or brought in, there's so many people who wouldn't have been impacted. So I think that was really good what you said.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I also want to shout out a few people just who've been mentors in my life. Somebody that was actually watching, I'm not sure if they're still on, but Pastor O'Brien Wimbish, who was one of the first, Reverend O'Brien Wimbish, who was one of the first young preachers that I met, like very early on in ministry when I first started my journey. And we're about the same age. And I can remember one of the first conversations that we had. He, as a young preacher, I think, in our early 20s, he had told me, one of the things I suggest to you is learn one different word a day and use that word in a sentence and continue to expand your vocabulary. I still remember that from almost 20 years ago when we had one of those first conversations. So shout out to O'Brien. And then also Pastor Tony Lee. Tony Lee has been a big influence. I said this in a podcast with National Network of Youth Ministries. But I built a lot of Keep It Real Fridays based on me going to young adult Bible study at Ebenezer for years when he was there. And also pieces of all of you all's ministry. And Monique had said it earlier about Pastor Peyton just being real and relevant, and Tony, doing these creative youth ministry events with the go-go bands, and then Tony Lee with, praise and worship with young adults with go-go, and just real relevant topics. I built a lot of my ministry in those foundations. So shout out to those individuals.
Hey, Thomas, let me say something real quick.
Sure.
just people that I think have influenced the youth culture back when we was coming up and still are powerful today was Deron Cloud, Pastor Deron Cloud with the boyfriend girlfriend thing.
Girlfriend
Who I
thing.
think he was incredible, and the influence that he had and what that kind of helped me like understand my style and see that it was okay to be yourself and be
Yeah.
able to articulate. And Pastor Keith Battle was one of the finest. I think, man, you like with yourself and Tony and Monique and Bobby, you got, I mean, we were blessed to be in a great time where God really raised up some phenomenal men and women. That's the blessing. It was men and women. Pastor Jasmine Skurlock, when she was around, you know, these people really helped really bring in a harvest of souls in the youth ministry. And I think we got to shout them out and just be thankful that we were around with them. And I was glad there was no competition between us, at least not to my understanding, but just the fact that we have a relationship with these people and be able to do the phenomenal things that we did. And then Tony on the go-go thing, he should have been a promoter, man. I thought he could have took over for RE or Trouble. You know what I'm saying? He's the man, Joe. A lot of people don't realize that.
I want to ask y'all this next question and jump into the meat of this conversation. Like, because we're reflecting a lot on the past and, you know, just so many great experiences and times. But when and how did you know that it was time to enter into the next season of your journey? How did you know when it was time to pass the baton? How did you know it was your expiration date for you for young adult ministry? And the importance of just that transitional servant leadership. I'm gonna actually pass it to Bobby if he would jump in first.
You know, that's a real interesting question. I'm not sure I figured that out yet. You know, because it seems like every different thing that God has me do still involves children or youth in some way. And I knew it was time for me to transition because it was clear. You know, when God speaks, sometimes we don't want to listen the first time, but he always speaks again. And he kept on saying the same thing to me. And that's why I knew it was time for me to transition when it came to my location and my position. But he keeps bringing me back around to the same things when it comes to children and youth. And I think that's not necessarily a transition in ministry, but I think when it's our calling, when it's our personal calling, that you never really get away from it, because when God calls you to do something, you can't run. So even though the location changes, the ministry changes, maybe now instead of being hands-on with the youth, you're training others to work with the youth. All of those things may change, but when it's your personal calling, you just you do it. You do it till you die. You just do it because that's what God has put inside of you. I don't know if that helped. I just know all of y'all are talking about, like Thomas, you were talking about the 35, 45 age group. I'm feeling kind of like the old man over here because I'm past 50 now. So, you know, but that's okay. I still got some good years in me.
I think one thing in the transition is at first it became an issue when the youth who I spent so much time pouring into, and it was time for them to transition into the new phase, and there was nobody there for the new phase for them. And I was like, okay, all right, so you graduated high school and I'm moving you on to college, and somebody's supposed to be there to take the baton and continue to walk you through, and they're not there. Okay, so, you know, I start working with them, and then I have this new group that's coming through, and I begin to see that I started naturally transitioning. I was still working with youth, but then I had these college kids. Then it was like, okay, now that they're out of college, now they're young adults. Okay, and I'm staying with them, and it's kind of that mentoring. You start off with just pouring into them, but then when there is a void, because oftentimes in the church, once they leave high school, there's this gap until they're like 35 and they come back to the church, and there's no one in between that's really pouring into them. And so it was just like, ooh, okay, all right, so I gotta, you know, let me keep going, because there was a lot of sacrifice, and there was a lot of time that was being poured into them. I remember this conference that I would always go and minister to these young women, these young girls. And then when they would leave on fire for God, but by the time I saw them that time next year, the following year, it was like nothing had ever happened. And I was like, okay. And so at that point, I made the decision, no, then I need to meet with you all either monthly or bi-weekly, because I need to make sure that you make it. Like, it's important to me that I don't just wait a whole year before I see you again. And so I think many of us, although we made that transition and we started, continuing on with them, you then had the ones who were like, hey, I've been waiting all this time to get to high school just so that I can work with you or be, under your ministry, that you kind of took them along as well.
Tony or Peyton, if you want to jump in on that one.
No, I'll jump in. With me, I began to do more training with a couple of my leaders, and in that training, I began to allow them to teach more, on Sunday mornings and on Thursday nights when we had our youth groups, and I would start transitioning myself over to the main services. But like Monique as well, is when those the ones who began to graduate, out of high school, and they, the statistics show that those individuals end up leaving church and never return. And I started transitioning over, to the young adult ministry as well, and then I was, found myself going back and forth. But I had taught a young man named Mike Burrell, who basically took over the entire youth ministry for me during that time frame. And then after that, John Swan began to transition in and take over the youth ministry. But even with Bobby, even now, by me being the senior pastor, of Powerhouse, the age group of my congregation is still that college career, age group. And a lot of them are individuals that I had when I was in youth ministry, like I'm the oldest one, in my church. 7, I'm the oldest one there, and everybody else falls under that age group. So it never really leaves you. You just transition to a different location or whatever, but it's going to always be a passion, that you have for young people, because like all of us have been saying, it's something that we all have been called to do. So I don't think we would never really transition totally out of it, because it's a part of us.
And so I'll say ditto, but I'm gonna throw the rock in the pond. So my transition wasn't the aspect of training different people and raising up different people, because we kind of had like a youth church. So teenagers were growing up. What I started finding partly was that kids didn't want to transition over to the main sanctuary. So the end came when the senior pastor was like, okay, we got to shut this down. We gotta put two together. And so that whole thing is now changing. So it got cut off. And so that was kind of like the signal, hey, it's time to move on. Now, I didn't move on to start my own church for like another 6 or 7 years, because of having to work through the discipline and the hurt of instead of having the process of being able to transition and turn it over to somebody else, it was just totally shut down. And so you got to work through that, through that hurt, work through that disappointment, and then start trying to figure out, recalibrate, what are you going to do next? That you're called, or I knew that I was called to ministry, and I knew I was called to pastor. I also knew had a prophetic tilt to what I wanted to do, but it was just a matter of letting God bring healing, letting God open up the doors and show the next direction on where you want to go. That is why I think one of the things that when we talk about this subject, it is the whole transition of the whole church as a whole to go away from youth ministry. And now I don't follow it like I used to. And I'm not going to say that youth ministry is dead, but it's not like when we were coming up. And I don't say that to be like that old dude, they don't know nothing about music. We had real music in our day. No, it's not like that. It's just that when we were doing youth ministry, there was a real youth ministry buzz,
Yeah.
in the whole city. And it's not like that. And a lot of that is, I think, out of the mega church ministry, we started finding out what the abuses, what the big crowds did to people, to the fact that now you're dealing with a whole bunch of church hurt, you're dealing with a whole bunch of church disappointment, you dealing with a lot of this because it was the fallout. We were gathering crowds, but I don't really think in a lot of ways we were really discipling people. We were really ministering to people's needs. We wanted the crowds, but we didn't want the responsibility in a lot of, and I'm not saying there's any one church, I'm just saying as a church as a whole. And I think that's why we're starting to see the mega church diminish, because, in hoarding people and not sharing people and not sharing resources, we ended up doing a lot of hurt to people.
Wow.
That caused a lot of fallout to now, and then we started hearing the stories about, a lot of people talk about the Roman Catholic Church, but there was a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of abuses, verbal, physical, that came out of the Protestant church, whether it's Pentecostal, Church of God in Christ, Church of God, Baptist, Baptist-costal, and all of these things. Now we have a church that really is not favored by the world like it was at one time when we were coming up in the mega church movement. Churches are dwindling the attendance. I think the corona has even brought out a lot of stuff as far as do we really have real relationships? Do we need to go back to foundation when it was about discipleship, when it was about transitioning and raising up people? So I think when you begin to talk about this and we start talking about transitions, a lot of transitions came because when God began to shake the church, all of a sudden now stuff started coming out. And when stuff started coming out, now all of a sudden, God is pulling the covers back and starting to show us. And matter of fact, I don't know if y'all can agree with this. I was thinking about the whole panel, and it was at DeVos, when we was at DeVos, that God really started dealing with me about looking at me, because you can be so busy and you can be running this big church. And I say this respectfully, for me, it was like God sat me down for a couple of years because I was so into building something great that I really wasn't focused on me, my family, or really building people. We were building kingdoms, but I'm not really sure it was really the kingdom of God we was building. We were trying to build, and I'm just speaking for me. And again, I say it respectfully. I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but I think when you sit back and you begin to look at it, you start seeing these things, and then all of a sudden, boom, you realize, man, there's parts of me that went neglected. There were parts of me that I really didn't do a good job in my marriage, with my kids, and all of these things. And so, that shaking and that shutting of the door was, in my opinion, really a great thing, because it made me have to look at me and really figure out where I'm going to go next. And then what am I going to change if I want to see change? You want whatever you want to see, you need to make it be yourself. And so I think that really helped me to take me to the next level and where I want to go and what I want to try to build and leave for the next generation.
I think something good that Peyton said, it did show us, but I felt like DeVos helped us to not be toxic leaders.
Mm-hmm.
It is so easy to have bleed through in ministry, right, that if you don't deal with your own stuff, there will be bleed through on to those who you serve. And so in the holding up the mirror, in the revealing, okay, I don't have balance in my life. Oh gosh, I struggle with wanting to hold it all together and feel like I have to do everything. And I don't understand what leveraging means. And I don't know what it means to really, if I'm going to be a real leader. I appreciated the fact that here it was this opportunity for us to pour into you so that you can be great leaders and pour into others, and not see it as so that we're not toxic. I think we are oftentimes right now seeing people who fail to have people have accountability in their lives. And because there was no accountability, because nobody was calling them out on their stuff, because they just allowed them to continue to go, we are now seeing the exposing of them. And so this has been truly a time that I think it was strategic that God had us at the time that he had us learn what we were supposed to learn because of the journey that it would take us on, so that you, Peyton, would know what it meant that now that you're leading a church, what you will and what won't do. You know what I mean? That you won't make the same mistakes and cause the hurt that you may have experienced and impact someone else who may not spiritually be mature enough to handle it. They could end up completely walking away, you know? So
Hey, hold on for a minute, because that's a great point. And this is one of the things I wanted to share, Thomas. When that whole thing with the youth ministry went down, everybody was like, "You're going to leave and start a church." I was like, "No, I'm not leaving no church," because I was bleeding. I was hurt. I mean, I'm like, I had just listened to Bishop Jakes talk about when shepherds bleed, and I had read that about the year and a half before. So that really impacted me. So when I was hurt, disappointed, that wasn't the time for me to start a church, because I would have bled. I would have been offended. I would have been hurt. I would have spent most of my time talking about the church ain't no good. My bishop ain't no good. This person ain't no good. And so God gave me time to heal. God gave me time to really understand that even though you might not have liked it, this was necessary. And then boom, here comes divorce right behind that. And that's what Monique was saying. It poured into and helped me to see where I needed to heal, what I needed to really focus in, so I wouldn't be toxic. And that's a big point that Monique was talking about. A lot of times people transition from one to another without taking the time to understand that some of the stuff they have is man-made, some of it is, and a lot of it is not God. And they got to go back and they have to unpack and they have to let go and tear down some stuff, so that when they go into the phase, they won't end up hurting people like how they was hurt.
They have to be spiritually mature. And I'm a big component of, you need to go through deliverance. If you are a leader, unless you get detox and allow the surgeon, the Father, to come and gut out and cut out those areas of your life that are not like him, then you will forever be at that place and you will not help anybody grow. You will just continue to produce what you are. But if you allow the Father to gut those things out and he pour his healing power in you, then you'll be able to transform nations. But you're not doing it. But can I say one more thing? I got to say one more thing, okay?
I'm going to let you say one more thing, but I think Tony wants to jump in.
Go ahead, Tony.
Okay.
Go ahead, Monique. I'll go ahead and let you finish. You're on fire, and I can come after.
I remember over this pandemic, God, and I've been sharing this, God was talking to me about Psalms 91, about coming under the shadow of his wing. And he was saying that, you know, when it talks about he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow. And God began to share with me that if I continue to come under the shadow of the mentors that I have had in my past, of those who I saw as mighty and great, rather than coming under his shadow, then I will only go as far as they went. But if I come under his shadow, under his wing, and allow him to cover me, then he will take me to places I've never been. But so many of us are constantly following after somebody else rather than following after the Father and allowing the Father to cover us and heal us so that he can take us places. That is all I want to say. Go ahead, Tony. I'm muting myself.
Put your cash app out there. Put your cash app out there.
I don't know if you guys remember the paper that we had to write. And Coach Carter, you know, where you see yourself 5 years from now, from the boss. And I remember, and I have to say, Coach was an influence, you know, in a lot that I learned at the boss. But when he had us to write, you know, where you see yourself 5 years from now, right? After I read my paper, and he read the paper, he came back to me and said, I want you to know your paper does not see you, you know, in youth ministry 5 years from now. I was thinking youth ministry, you know what I'm saying, in that paper. And he said, no, yours is not showing you, you know, that you'll be in youth ministry 5 years from now. Lord knows, 2015 is when I left youth ministry and planted a church. We graduated in 2010. you know, and God has just been, and I think, you know, and I go back and I think about that often, you know, and Peyton hit it right on the head. I think those 5 years, that 5-year gap was God beginning to prepare us for our next level of ministry. And I think a lot of us, when we wrote that paper, we still saw ourselves as youth leaders, you know what I'm saying, or youth pastors. But that 5-year period that we had, you know, I think God was beginning to shape us and to form us right into the next position and calling that He has taken us all into. So that, you know, it's really ironic on how I think the boss came in and just changed all of our lives. To be totally honest, and just open our minds up to see more than what we, you know, were seeing at that particular time.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Oh, it was interesting that he mentioned the breakthrough plan, because I was going through some papers a couple weeks ago, and we had copies of everyone's breakthrough plan. And so I reread through all of those, but then I read mine, and I realized I had that breakthrough plan, and in my mind I had a 10-year plan. And looking back, none of that was God's plan. You know, that's just what my vision was. But God's plan was so much more spectacular than anything I could have dreamed of. I could never imagine the steps that God took me in since that time, but it's so much better. So, you know, we have our own ideas, but God is the one that controls our future.
Yes.
I want to bring some context for those who may not know what we're talking about when we say DeVos. So all of us, and this is where our connection comes from, is from the DeVos Urban Leadership Youth Leadership Institute. And back in 2009, we all applied for this program. We kind of heard through word of mouth, through different pastors or individuals and persons. And there were like a couple hundred people that applied from the DC area, and only 10 people were selected. And we were 5 of 10 people selected at that time from youth ministry leaders. And we formed this cohort, this family that we all in our different ways kind of still stay connected for the most part. And so a lot of these things we talk about, accountability and interdependence and balance, you know, some of the things that we've kind of mentioned is a part of all of that. And shout out to Coach Ron, who's still on.
Coach Ron.
And I can remember when y'all start bringing up Coach Ron, I can remember, and many of y'all would remember me venting about what I was going through in youth ministry. And I would just say, my youth, my youth, my youth, my youth, my youth. And Coach Ron Carter just like literally stepped on my whole heart and my whole life. And he said, Brakeem, you know how Coach Ron talked, Brakeem. Brakeem the dream. And he just said that these youth don't belong to you. They belong to God. And when he told me that crushed just crushed my whole, you know, but I needed to hear that. You know, and many of us just grabbed so many experiences during that time. And I'm so grateful DeVos is coming back around to DC in the next year or two. So I'm grateful to even look forward to another group that will come together in that time. Coach is laughing. I want to throw this last question because I know Monique has to jump off, and I'm going to ask Monique. Because, you know, Monique has such a, you know, huge schedule where she got to pencil us in 60 minutes at a time.
Hey, you know what's funny about Monique? She's still the same way. She always come across like she's all quiet. And she, you know, oh, no, I don't have anything to say. And the Holy Ghost hit her. We always on the floor getting ready to repent. Jesus, help me.
She always sit back in the corner like this with her hands folded, and then she just come through and drop bombs all the time.
Boom.
So I'm gonna allow Monique to drop the mic on this last question here, and then everybody else can jump in because I know Monique got to go to her next engagement because she's so in demand across the world. But Monique, what advice would you give to current youth and young adult leaders, ministers, and pastors? Is there something that you wish you could have done better moving forward in this leg of your journey? You're working in the area of trafficking in the Charlotte area. You moved into a different arena, but still touching youth and young adults. But as you have made this transition, what is some advice that you would give to some youth pastors like Ray Nelson? That's he's an OG too, but he's watching. But and even to some of the younger ones that may be watching, what advice would you give to us?
Be sensitive to the Holy Spirit. I think that we want to look at, oh, this group is doing this. Ooh, that's good. Let me take a little bit of that. This group is doing this. Ooh, I'm going to take a little bit of that. What is the Holy Spirit saying about your youth that you are ministering to? Knowing that he speaks to all of us, that we can hear from God. It is important that we are asking him in this season, what do I need to do in this season? What you might be doing in this season, you may not do in the next season, and that's okay. But being sensitive to his leading and his guiding will help you to impact your youth in a way that you've never impacted them before. And I think so often we think we know what our youth want. We think we know, okay, this would be a good idea based on something, oh, I would like that, or if I was a youth, I would have liked that. But if you are not listening to God and how he is leading, he knows what is happening to your youth in the secret place. The other aspect of you being sensitive to the Holy Spirit is if you really feel that you are called, then you need to get some rug burns on your face by laying prostrate on the floor and praying for your youth. And seeking God for each and every one of them, calling them each by name. There is a lot of work as youth ministers that needs to be done in the closet before you ever come out to preach. If you will spend time in the face of the Father, then he will give you clear direction on what to do as far as your youth are concerned. But if you feel that you're going to do your own thing, and I'm just going right back, if you're going to do your own thing, then your youth, it won't grow and their lives won't be impacted. And it's about really impacting their lives. And so I remember back in LeVar Jones, when I was in high school, I have to mention him because for years before I ever found out what his name was, I think like years out of high school, I always would talk, when I talked to you, about this guy in my school who every single week would come up with these messages on a card, and he was passing them out, ministering to people in the hallway. And yes, I would say, but I made sure I found him on those days because I wanted whatever his little sermon was on the paper. It was a God idea that God had given him, but yet it made an impact on my life enough that years down the road, and to this day, I still talk about him and the impact that he made. If you will seek the Father, God will give you things that are so unique that will impact people's lives that generations to come will talk about.
Shout out to LeVar Jones, my little big brother, who's still doing youth ministry along with myself. So shout out to LeVar and all the great work. And he's still being creative. I be looking to LeVar for ideas too. But Monique, I know whenever you need to jump off. We're not going to hold you, but we appreciate you. But Bobby, Tony, Peyton, if y'all want to jump in, just let us know, advice you would give to the next youth leader.
I would say be transparent, and authentic, and don't be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. When you, especially with the young people in our generation, man, they just don't want you pushing God. You got to listen to them. You got to get to know them and get to understand them, to where they going to trust you, and value, not only value you, but value your opinion and your thoughts, so you want to be transparent with them and let them know, you're human just like they are, and some, we make mistakes just like they do. And once they see, that you're going to keep it real with them, they'll trust you and begin to keep it real with you. So I would just say to be transparent, be authentic, and whatever you're doing with them, and just don't push, you can't push God all the time, but get to understand them and their thought process and what they're going through, on a daily basis. And those kids are put. I mean, they give you anything, anything you desire to have from them, because they trust you and they know that you got their best interest, at heart.
I would say I agree. I mean, I hope somebody's taking notes because I think these points are valuable. But I would say, like, kind of like Tony, but I would say it like this. Um, don't make youth ministry a babysitting service, but see it as an opportunity to really pour into the next generation. One of the things I heard Stanley say was that many times our adult questions undermine our childhood faith. So we've got to learn to help grow a generation's faith by listening not only to God, listening to them, but also being willing to deal with the most important questions that this generation has, and be able to sit talk about it and look at it from the scriptures. We're living in an age today where truth is now subjective, it's not objective like it was when we were coming up. So we've got to go back and we have to have an apologetic to this generation. And we've got to answer questions from from the Bible, and let them ask questions, because I think especially what Tony was saying is that for a lot of times we are the generation not to be able to go to God and ask God why. Like, that's a bad thing. Like, God, I don't understand this. And when the Bible says, "And all you're getting, get understanding." So in order to understand it, we have to be able to teach kids how to come in balance to God, what Monique was saying, in prayer, and be able to ask these questions. Then if they come to us, we can't shy away from it. And I think one of the greatest things that I ever saw was when people can't say, "I just don't know. I don't even know that. I got questions." That's the transparency that's necessary to say, "I don't know." So let's go on this journey together, and let's look at this together. And then I think together we'll be able to discover some new things together that will help us grow together.
Mm-hmm.
I think my best advice would be to learn how to care for yourself. Make sure you take care of yourself physically. Make sure that you're poured into spiritually. You can't give out what you don't have. And so you have to be poured in spiritually. It's like a cell phone that needs to be recharged. So many times we let our own battery drain all the way down. And then to allow ourselves to heal emotionally. When Peyton was talking about the things that are being exposed, a lot of those people, if they had dealt with their emotional baggage, that would have never happened. So much church hurt happens because people have not allowed themselves to be in a good place emotionally. So I feel like if the best advice I could give is learn how to take care of yourself so that you can represent God well. If you don't take care of yourself, then you become an embarrassment to the kingdom.
And if you need a therapist, talk to a therapist. You're not crazy for wanting to talk to
That's absolutely true. Therapy is a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is.
Every Tuesday at 5:30. It's important. It's important. And sometimes I don't want to go, but sometimes I need to go, and that's the reality of it. Thank you all, man. I hope y'all been soaking up this wisdom on Facebook and just getting to know these great individuals that I'm just honored and blessed to be connected with. Coach Ron Carter says, "Seek the Holy Spirit, be transparent, self-care, get to know the youth." Just giving us a good recap just this evening's conversation. We need to do this again at some point in the near future. If we don't come together enough as family. If you all love this conversation or something stuck out, put something in the comments on Facebook to let us know that you really got something out of this conversation. While you're doing that, I just want to ask the persons on this panel if they would just let us know how can we continue to follow you as far as your ministry, as far as social media or where you're worshiping, things of that nature, just how we can stay connected. Definitely want Bobby to shout out the Christian Education Conference in January as well, that you all are doing that. But definitely, if you all have heard something great, put it in the comments. Some people will go back and watch this after this live feed. Definitely let us know, because we definitely want to have another conversation. This was very robust. But anybody can jump out there and just let the people know how they can continue to follow your ministry.
So you can follow us on A Fresh Start CLT. So it's AFRESHSTART CLT. So A Fresh Start CLT is the best way to stay connected to me.
You can find me the For Him Covenant Church page, the number 4 Him HIM Covenant Church page. That's the best way to always find me. We're on our church services every Saturday from 10 to 12. And you can find us For Him Covenant Church, or you can find it at Peyton Gray on Facebook, PEYTONGRAY. That's the best 2 ways to find me.
You can find us on Facebook, Powerhouse Church of God, as well. You can find us on Instagram, Powerhouse Church, email, Powerhouse Church of God 15, and then our website is powerhousechurch.org.
Our church, Landmark Church, is landmarkchurchva.org. And National Capital Christian Education Conference is on Facebook, National Capital Christian Education Conference. It will be the last Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of January next year, and it's all virtual this year. The focus will be on knowing why we believe what we believe. So that'll be the focus, whether it's youth, kids, men, women, leaders. It's a focus on apologetics, knowing why we believe what we believe.
Oh, one more thing, Thomas. We're located at 12109 Cherry Tree Crossing Road. We are open to having services, but we are practicing social distancing, and face masks are required. Our service times are 10 a.m. and then Bible studies are 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday nights.
And I go to Nikeo Church, so it's nikeochurch.org.
Okay, I'm gonna add mine in there too. For Him Covenant Church. For Him Covenant Church.org. I'm gonna add mine too. We have Bible study every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on Facebook. Yeah, I'm gonna add mine too. Yeah. KO Powerhouse.
Ain't no competition on this goal.
Nah, ain't no competition on this page. Nah.
Oh man, I really appreciate this. Was great. Go ahead,
Love
Monique.
you guys, man.
All right, guys.
So
Monique.
we're so grateful for just everybody who was on this panel. Continue to follow Keep It Real Fridays. We will not have a live feed next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday, but we will connect again November the 30th. And I already shouted out earlier in the conversation, our next guest will be the Reverend O'Brien Wimbish. And I'll drop the flyer and the topic tomorrow as far as that next conversation is going to be. It's going to be different. We're going to talk about sex in the church and what the church, how the church, talks about Black bodies and sex. I may not get a lot of viewers on that one, but we're going to have a conversation anyway.
Oh, no, you're going to have a lot of them on that one. That's the subject. You're going to have a lot of people talking about that.
Right.
But yeah, I'm excited. And definitely we have in early December, a good friend of mine dropped a book about Black wealth, Tania. She's going to be joining us. Going to be dropping her book next month, and she'll be talking about her book release and talking about just Black wealth. And we'll have a conversation about that and how that's important with millennials in particular in our young generation. And I'm just grateful for my brothers, my sister who jumped off. Thank you all again. These brothers are and my sister is so busy in the kingdom. I didn't know I could get all 4 of them together. I'm grateful and hope we can do this again real soon. And so I'm gonna find a way to get Coach Ron Carter on the next one too.
That's who you
come
should
back
get on.
together.
And you know daggone well, Thomas, all you got to do is give us a phone call and tell us what you want to do. You know we'll be here. Ain't nobody that busy. Ain't nobody that busy.
You know I got to call all y'all executive assistants and get on y'all calendars.
No, you don't.
You know, with Tony Bledsoe not in Chicago, you know what I'm saying? You know,
That's right. Yeah.
But love y'all. Y'all have a good night. Facebook and YouTube for those who are watching, and we'll connect again soon. And just thanks again for tuning in, and drop some love to my guests and follow their ministries and stay connected to them, and definitely reach out to them if you heard something great. God bless you all, Facebook.
Hey, all right, man. Love you guys.
Love you guys, man. Peace out.